Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you guys are doing well today. I'm going to be exploring a watch that I've spoken about at length. It was my first vintage watch that I actually ever purchased. It was this Memosail Yacht Timer chronograph. And what I thought I would do is actually show you a little bit more about the movements of this watch. The Memosail used a variety of movements throughout its history. And so I thought I would talk about the Valjoux movement that's used inside of this Memosail. I'll say this at the beginning of the video, I do not recommend opening up the case back of your watches. It is not something that you should really do. A watchmaker should always be opening up the case back, as they are experienced and trained in how to treat watches that have their case backs removed and make sure that the movement remains as fresh and clean and beautiful as it was when it was originally created. I'm doing this purely for an educational, to try and be educational for this video, but I thought we could look at this Valjoux movement that was very influential in the Memosails, but also influential in watchmaking in general. Valjoux really created movements that were used by many, many brands and allowed for sort of the mass production of watches to take place. But what they were creating was a very robust and well manufactured movement that was easy to service and created some really beautiful watches. This Memosail included in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys sort of a top-down view of the movement of this watch, and I'll kind of walk you through what the movement is, some of the modifications that were made by Memosail to put it into this yacht timing watch. And I hope this is an interesting video for you guys. If you guys do like these types of videos, I might do this with a couple more watches. But I thought I would start out with the watch that started it off for me, which was this Memosail. So without further ado, I'll flip perspective so you guys can have that top-down view of this movement. All right, so welcome back to the video, guys. So like I said, I wanted to talk through the Memosail Yacht Timer and the movement that was used in this watch, and kind of give you a look at what it actually looks like when you start the chronograph, how it runs normally, and those types of things. This is something that I fell in love with watchmaking. I fell in love with watches because of the watchmaking aspect of things. I think movements are so interesting, and especially this Valjoux 7733-4, I think this is something that was really interesting to me. So I have taken the case back off of the watch already, and I'll sort of show you here, but the case back itself does have basically a serial number on it there. It has 1012 on it, and then there are some markings for the watchmakers who have done work on it as well. And then if you turn it over, you'll see here it's got the Memosail sort of logo on it there, and then it has Swiss made, chrono, stainless steel case back, base metal bezel. So you've got a really nice sort of case back there. But what I really wanted to talk about was the watch itself. So I'm just gonna quickly flip this over so you can see. This is the, if you haven't seen, this is the dial of the watch, and what's interesting about this piece is that it basically has a disc that is a 10-minute counter for to be used during yacht races or regattas. So what you'll see is once the chronograph gets to 30, what the inner disc will do is it'll turn half a notch, and we'll just wait for that to happen, because I think that's a very important part about knowing what this actually is here. So you'll see here, and there you go. So what I'll do is I'll stop the chronograph really quickly, and reset it. And so while that runs, I'll sort of just go into a little bit of the history of this specific movement in Memosail and what they did with this. So I'll show you the movement sort of while I talk through it, but basically Valjoux developed this movement to be used in chronographs. The movement itself is the Valjoux 7737, and it's basically a well-constructed, not super highly finished chronograph movement that was produced to be put into chronograph watches. What this company ended up doing, Memotime, who actually own this, is they leveraged one of their, Memotime created, sorry, I got this backwards. Valjoux basically created a new watch company called Memotime in order to sell these new watches that they wanted to produce. And they, Valjoux owned Valjoux SA, and they decided to develop a movement that would rival other yacht timing movements that were made by companies like Heuer. And they filed a patent that was similar to this in Switzerland that would be used in this Memosail watch. That it was the CH566052 Pistologie à mécanisme de chronographie. And this was basically, in English, chronograph mechanism timepiece, which is like a loose translation of it. But basically what it did was it took the Valjoux 7737 and it modified it just enough to be used in this Memosail timepiece. Essentially what was done in that modification was they took the chronograph wheel that is used inside of this movement, and instead of having one tooth that would basically be on the chronograph wheel and keep track of every minute that passed, they added a second tooth onto that chronograph wheel so that every time 30 seconds passed, they were able to track that. And like you saw in the beginning, every single time the chronograph hand goes to 30, the inner disc moves one notch. And then when it gets to 60, it moves a second notch, and that's basically a minute that's been elapsed. So what they're using that extra tooth on that chronograph wheel for is to show the elapsing of time, but also give the wearer an indication when 30 seconds elapses and when a minute elapses. So super cool modification that was done to this piece. It is obviously based off of that 7737, but it's known as the 7733 or 34. And if I look at this piece here, underneath the balance wheel that you can see spinning right here, it actually says 7737. There was no indication that this was, there was no indication that this was a modified 7737 to a 7733 or 34. It still had the same movement number. The only difference is, and you can probably see it on this piece, is you can see that Memosail is written on this plate right here. I want to make sure that you can see that to indicate that it was modified for the Memosail. So this was the first movement that was used by Memosail in some of their pieces. I've done a full rundown on the history of the Memosail, so I'll put a link to that in the description of this video, as well as on our article. But that's essentially the history of this movement. Now, what I'm going to do is, I think what's really cool is when you're able to actually see how this piece, what happens when you actually start the chronograph. So what I'm going to do is start it. So you can see that the clutch was engaged and the chronograph is currently moving. Then if I'm going to stop it really quick, you can see that it's paused. I'm going to start it again. And then I'm going to stop it and I'm going to reset it. So pretty cool to actually see how the movement sort of engages when the chronograph is engaged. What's even more interesting is actually to see the chronograph wheel turn as the disc turns as well. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to do as well. But I think it's just an absolutely cool movement to see, and it's really cool to see the chronograph wheel sort of go at it. As you can see, the movement is not highly finished like some other pieces. It's fairly simply finished, stainless steel sort of brush on it, which I think is really cool. One of the things you're probably thinking to yourself is, this watch looks like it's been sort of through the works. You can see that the gasket actually doesn't go completely around the movement, it's the watch itself. This is a vintage piece. I actually like the fact that it's sort of beat up a little bit. I think it has a little bit of character, but a really cool movement nonetheless, and really fun to operate. So I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this piece with me. If you like these types of videos, I'd love to do some more of them. Again, I'm going to say it, I said it at the beginning of the video, but I want to say it again. I do not recommend opening up your watches to take a look at the movements. This is really something that a watchmaker should do. I'm trying to do this for just for educational purposes, and I have a piece that I'm okay with sort of doing this with. So don't do this on your own, but I hope you enjoyed looking at this Valjoux 7733-4. And with that said, let's flip perspective so we can close out the video. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this Memosail Valjoux movement. I really loved, one of the things that I fell in love with watches, especially vintage watches, was the mechanical aspects of these pieces. And looking at the movement of this watch, it really does bring out the joy that I had originally when I first got into watches, but also when I first got into the Memosail as a chronograph. So I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at this watch. Let me know what you think about these types of videos. I'd love to, make these more if you guys like them. Also, if you have any thoughts about the Valjoux movement, let me know. I'd love to hear those as well. If you are new to the channel, welcome to Life on the Wrist. We're enthusiasts of watch. I'm an enthusiast of watches, so I create videos about watches, just about any topic you can really think of. So if you like those types of videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you wouldn't mind hitting that like button for us for the YouTube analytics, it really does help us out. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time.